I did a tier list video a little while back where I reviewed the armor for The Witcher, and when I got to Calanthe's armor I said there was something about it that bugged me, but I didn't know what it was. Did I appreciate that they put her in plate armor? Yes. Did I appreciate the lion motif and the actual helmet? Yes. Did it look weird to me? Also yes. Also I asked my commenters what they thought the problem was, and that, my friends, was an education all on its own. So we're going to do some completely unnecessary nitpicking. This is going to be a long video. And we're also going to contrast Calanthe's armor to some other women in plate armor I've been asked to look at to see if we can do better. This isn't to pick on Calanthe in particular, it's just an illustration of the kinds of problems that you might run into when you're designing armor, particularly when you also have to budget for Yennefer's dresses. The categories of problem most commonly identified were character, material, and of course... context! Whoop! Yes, indeed. Context. But they do intertwine, so let's get into it. Let's start with materials because they're the most straightforward. I tend to go very easy on material in armor when it comes to live action media because I understand that metal is expensive and harder to work with than, say, plastic, and also they have a lot of people they need to outfit. And also lighter is better because actors get tired. But if we're going to be thorough, and I hope that we are, then there is a somewhat insubstantial look to Calanthe's armor. The breastplate looks very thin. It's got kind of weird edges. The spaulders look kind of plasticky. There's kind of a LARP armor feel, is what I'm saying. Not that LARP armor can't look really good, but you know what I mean. Also, the colour in the pictures particularly looks a bit off, and the gambesson looks like it's made of non-natural fibres and also looks thin. Just insubstantial. Now again, I do get time and budgeting constraints, but all of these things together sort of contribute to the feeling of and particularly because of the thin gambesson and the small spaulders. She doesn't look balanced or of a size with the rich Cintrans who are in plate armor, particularly her husband. If you look at Alice in Wonderland, in the context of the movie, when you're watching it, you know, doing its job, it looks good. It looks really good. I would rank it, I'd wear it. Or for those of you who watched the Witcher video, toss a coin to your designer. The shiny fabric, which I'm not sure if meant to be gambesson or magic metallic fabric, does look kind of thin. Also, gorget, wear, helmet, existing, question mark? But even in the picture of the costume where you can clearly see that it's not made of metal, the silhouette looks balanced. It is sort of aesthetically appealing. The basiques and the pauldrons give you wider shoulders and a sort of bigger chest, which gives you that more imposing look. And there's plenty of coverage of the whole body, so even though it looks a little bit off materials-wise, aesthetically, you know, the shape looks balanced. So the combination of Calanthe having spaulders instead of pauldrons and a lack of upper arm protection and wearing a thin gambesson sort of comes together to give you a kind of strange silhouette. Like, her arms contrast badly with the breastplate, which is quite boxy. Actually, the breastplate is a whole set of issues in and of itself, being ill-fitting by being both too big and too small at the same time, albeit in different dimensions. Now, Zach Evans is a subscriber of mine and also a jousting and reenacting type, and he made a response video to mine where he said that Calanthe's breastplate looks to be inspired by sort of late 15th, early 16th century Gothic armor, and he based that on the fact that it has the tassets, which are sort of segmented. That's the upper thigh armor, which actually looks pretty good, you know, credit where it's due. Well, it looks pretty good in the silver armor. I'm not entirely sure about the gold, but never mind. And he also based that impression on the fluting on the breastplate, which I also like because I just like fluting. Sue me. But he said that the big problem is that the front is really, really flat. And it's flat to the point that it looks almost exactly like a backplate instead of a breastplate. He was not alone in that opinion. So there were people suggesting that it looked exactly like a backplate, which it does. And then other people were saying, no, it's just because you're used to boob armor. That's what the problem is. But no, that ain't it. Because even men's breastplates have a curve because, you know, breathing and blow deflection and force redistribution. We'll come back to that in a sec. The "we took a backplate and stuck it on the front" impression is also strengthened by the fact that the armholes are just a little bit small and restrictive. Often with something like this you'd have mail underneath, so you'd either have voiders, which sort of cover the underarm area, or you have a full-on hauberk, which is like a male shirt if you're going the whole hog. But even if you only have a gambesson underneath, like the regular Cintran soldiers, then you can see that their armholes come in further to give them more mobility. On the subject of mail, if we look at Snow White in Snow White and the Huntsman, I was initially quite confused by the mail in this armor. I mean, materially, I'm not sure how much of it is actually made of metal, but again, movies, ask me if I care. No, not really. My actual confusion stems from the fact that this arm mail and down here grieve, and this arm no mail and down here no grieve. I think that the reason for this is that she has a relatively large shield. And I'm always happy to see a shield. Shields are relatively rare in visual media, so, you know, yay for that. But I guess then it makes more sense because your arm has already been protected by the big shield. You don't want to double up on weight and protection. Shields are already heavy, so okay. I kind of get it. It does look a bit weird when you just see her walking around without her shield though. But the other problem that is created by not having mail on that arm is that we can see that that's not a gambazon that she's wearing, it's just like a thin kind of leather-ish shirt. I mean, there's also no throat protection and no helmet, but how often do I get these things? Snow White's armor as a whole is serviceable. I'd say it's pretty good, but I do hope that she has that shield on her at all times, otherwise it's just going to be like, hey, come and attack my unarmored left side. On the subject of the gorget, which is the throat protection, if you look at Galadriel in the new Rings of Power screenshots, I guess, she has one. It's very tight though. I'm going to assume this is just because elves are really magically amazing at making armor. I believe that Tolkien was more into mail than plate armor, but I get why you might have to change that up because audiences have been trained to think that mail armor is absolutely useless. Don't get me started. Anyway, back to Calanthe and breastplates. Interestingly, aside from that looks like a backplate, the most common other kind of comment I got about the breastplate was, that's giving me 19th century cuirassier vibes as opposed to 15th, 16th century Gothic plate vibes. So a cuirassier is a cavalry soldier whose main form of armor is the cuirass, hence the name. I think they first appeared in the mid to late 16th century, and that was also when they were most heavily armored, and their thing was sword plus pistol plus horse. I don't believe that the Witcher universe has pistols, and so from an historical perspective you might think, well, that's a bit of a mismatch. Which isn't necessarily a deal breaker, but given how tightly arms and armor are tied together in terms of capabilities, that might have made the more historically minded among you look at it askance. Luckily for me, I'm not particularly historically minded, so These cuirassiers of Count Pappenheim have some similarities to Calanthe, including those tassets, but they have much more substantial shoulder and upper arm protection, and so they look more balanced. And so we're back to aesthetics. And not just aesthetics, but aesthetics and looking like the people around you. And the later ones skip upper and lower arm protection almost entirely, and also do away with the tassets, so they really are just cuirass, sword, pistol, horse, and helmet. Obviously. Here's a Napoleonic cuirassier and his epic facial hair in 1809, for example. And please note that even on Monsieur French cuirassier's cuirass, you have a much more pronounced curve at the front of the breastplate. Men's breastplates have it, Snow White's has it, Galadriel's has it, Alice's has it. It's a unisex thing. Breathing is a unisex thing. I'm not sure why they did this either. As several people have suggested, they mixed up a breastplate with a backplate, or they deliberately put on the backplate because they thought, boob plate is silly, we must have something flat. I mean, it's true, you don't need two separate breast holes for women, that's silly, I made a whole video about it. All breastplates sit proud of the chest, both so there is room for the chest to expand, to breathe, and also so that the force of blows isn't just transmitted into the body when you get hit. Versus. There's more on that in Zach's video, I'll link it in the description. Excessively booby breastplates are indeed quite silly, but breastplates that are so flat they look like backplates are an overcorrection, and not a comfortable one either. Contextually speaking, in the show, Calanthe in armor looks different to her husband, she looks different to the Royal Guard, or whoever these guys are. She looks different to the Season 2 Nilfgaardians. The combination of the unpadded arms and the lack of upper arm protection and the breastplate mean that the spolders just look like decorations as opposed to actually being in any way protective. And she and her soldiers look like they're from a different time period to everyone else. Although it has to be said that the Season 1 Nilfgaardians look like they're from a different planet to everyone else, so what can you do? That being said, the Witcher show as a whole doesn't have a particularly cohesive aesthetic or style, so that's not just a Calanthe problem, that's an issue with everybody. And related to context, the last category of comments I got about Calanthe's armor were related to character, and why they didn't feel like the armor fit with Calanthe's character in the show. Whether or not it fits with her character in the books, I would not know. But character is always important to consider when you're designing clothes for people, and that includes armor. If Calanthe's soldiers look like relatively lightly armored cuirassiers and everybody else is wearing full plate, then that you can kind of get away with. Poor soldiers being less well protected than rich soldiers is not going to raise too many eyebrows. Even if they do look a bit temporally shifted, it's a fantasy show, you can kind of fudge it. But Calanthe is the queen. She should have access to the best stuff. She should have armor that looks exactly how she wants it to, within the bounds of physics, obviously. Some people didn't like the color of the gold breastplate, which I thought it looked okay in the show. When I look at pictures of it, it does look a bit strange, but you know, I can see why you wouldn't like that. Some people seem to think that the gold breastplate was actually made of gold as opposed to just being sort of coated in gold. Don't worry about that, that would not be a thing. But I'm really posh and rich and I'm going to put gold over the top of my armor. That was definitely a thing historically. Whether or not Calanthe in particular would have chosen a gold breastplate as someone who's a very practical kick-ass warrior, you could debate that. I would say probably yes. She does have some very ornate looking dresses, so having slightly fancy armor doesn't seem like it would be out of character for her, as long as it didn't actively impede her, obviously. Again, you can nitpick like this for any costume, and as in this case, it is absolutely overkill. There is no need to think about this hard. And it's also true that there is a world of difference between drawing a picture and designing a video game where you have a reasonable amount of control over what things look like versus having to come up with thousands of costumes for a variety of different things, and you're on a budget, so you have to either make or source them, and you have time constraints, etc, etc. But regardless, I hope that this deep dive into Calanthe's armor has been entertaining or educational, or hopefully both. Armor doesn't have to be perfect to be non-distracting to the vast majority of your audience. Given how dumb a lot of women's armor designs are in the first place, the fact that they put Calanthe in armor which isn't really obviously terrible is already enough to mean that most of your audience will be like, yeah, good. But in this case, I feel like it looks uncomfortable for the actress to wear. Like, she seems uncomfortable moving in it. And I feel like just a couple of changes would have made a big improvement in that area and also made it look better. And there are levels of this, obviously. From let's tweak this thing to make it a bit more comfortable and nice looking, all the way up to we're going to make this completely accurate, but our actress might not be able to move in it. So you have to balance these things. With that said, if I had to be like quick and dirty fixes to make this a bit better, there are two main things I would have done. One, find the chest plate that back plate came with and swap it over, or at least hammer out some more space in the chest plate for actual breathing and maybe try and shorten it a bit. The chest plate will have more room for breathing. It will also probably have better segmentation that's designed for the front of the body. I feel like that would be helpful. And two, replace those spolders with pauldrons, because that will cover a multitude of sins. With pauldrons, which are designed to cover a bit more of the upper arm and the upper chest and the armpit, you won't be able to see those joins in her gambesson. You won't be able to see the armholes of the breastplate, and so if they're still looking a bit dodgy, that will cover that up. And the fact that her upper arms and shoulders will have more protection on them makes her look more balanced silhouette-wise, and also makes her look more like the other rich Cintrans. If you have more time and money, then one suggestion I saw was half rarer braces and voiders on the arms, which would definitely make her look more protected. I would add to that some mail which actually covers her crotch, because it looks a bit unprotected at the moment, and maybe just change up the gambesson entirely. Just go find her one that is thicker. Of course, the problem with that is the more armor you add, the heavier it is for the actress and the more difficult it is to swing a sword, and also it'll take more time to put on and take off again. And so while I sometimes get a bit of flack for going too easy on armor in fictional settings, like, I feel there's a balance to be struck between looking nice and looking protective and looking realistic, and real people have to wear this for 14 hours a day. So if you enjoyed this video and would like to listen to me waffling about boob armor for 17 minutes, then there should be a video up here for you. If you'd like to watch my extended videos on the topic of armor, this is not a video which has an extended version. This video is long enough already. Then you can join my Patreon, or you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button down below. And regardless, hope to see you soon.